Hi everyone, Ivy Lim here, and I am just waiting for Lorree Appleby. She is a radical forgiveness coach, and she's just jumping on here. Ooh, here we go. And we're just going to talk about radical living, radical forgiveness, her niche. Hey, there you are.
Hi, how are
Um,
you?
I'm good. Okay, I love your
Good.
tag. Yeah, forgiveness is freedom.
Sure is.
Um, we're just, yeah, we could wait until, but anyway, for the recording,
Mhm.
we can start talking and jump in if there's any questions that people have in terms of forgiveness. It's a huge topic. And I love the fact that it is sort of your baseline and your foundational niche for radical living, radical forgiveness. So, can you tell me? I remember this story a little bit, but how did you decide to go that path in terms of your coaching business?
Well, what I was an assistant working for a business coach, so I was learning a lot about the coaching world and just different things that were going on in my life. I was not happy, even though I had a lot of things that I should have been happy for. I wasn't. I was introduced to the book Radical Forgiveness by my business coach, and I started reading that. And it was just very divinely guided towards me that I went on a webinar about how to find your purpose. And that was done by Colin Tipping, who's the founder of Radical Forgiveness. And I went through this webinar, and all the check marks were there, like to become a coach. And there was a live training. And it was just a very intuitive thing that I did. And I just decided to do it. And it really resonated with me because I did have some resentment and unresolved feelings for, you know, family members, people in my life, people that I loved. And I didn't want to be unhappy anymore. The book really resonated with me and I just went for it.
Yeah, so let's
Yeah.
talk. I mean, for me, growing up in the Christian world, it's forgiveness is always something that you had to do. And so on the flip side of that, there's a guilt associated with the fact that
Mm-hmm.
you can't forgive or you don't want to forgive. And I mean, we'll touch upon all these topics, but in the work that I do now with women, helping women find the love of their life, I actually help them to release the past and heal the past. And it's a cultivation
Mm-hmm.
because it is a big energy block. But how do you find, what's it been like for you, um, having to deal with people who have somebody very huge to forgive or something very very adverse or very big obstacle, um, and two, like they really don't want to, like
Okay.
how do
So
you
I think
work
that would
around
be
that?
better if I answered the second question first. If someone's not ready to forgive, then I would never suggest working with them because they have to be willing to do it. They have to want to be able to let that go. So if they're still stuck in and not that there's anything wrong with that, I want to say, but if they're still stuck in the thing where they don't want to and they feel that they're not ready, because I know exactly how that feels because I met a forgiveness coach 2 years before became to be one. And when I met her and she suggested it to me, I was like, no, I want nothing to do with forgiveness because I had barely established some boundaries with the person that I, had the resentment and the anger towards. So I wasn't ready at that time. So I really there's no point in trying to do something you don't feel ready for. When you feel ready, there will be signs, something like things like, I'm sick of being unhappy. I'm sick of, trying everything and nothing working. I'm ready for a change. I want to be free from the past. I don't want to have these heavy feelings anymore. All of those signs would say to me that someone wants to forgive, but I still always have a in-depth conversation to really find out why they want to forgive and what have they tried before. And then I usually ask them, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you? Because if they're not an 8 or above, I won't even suggest working with them. You have to be ready.
So how is it though then, if you are looking to move on? I mean, forgiveness is about a relationship. And like you had mentioned, it is about also establishing boundaries. But I mean, I think most people know that they should do it. And I hate the word should.
Yeah.
But they just can't, or they need another angle or another pathway to do that. Because, and I always say this in my own coaching as well, is that resentment and non-forgiveness is a very heavy energy, and your body and your energy doesn't know the difference. They
Yeah.
just know that it resides there,
Right.
that your body is blocked, yet your energy is blocked because you're not able to forgive, yet you want to establish another, you want to move forward in another area of your life. So how do you sort of work around that angle with somebody when they know, like, yes, say for, like, let's just call it, like, let's just say, use an example to keep everything simple, like a parent. I think parental forgiveness is one of the biggest things that I've come across, because how we've been brought up affects our future relationships, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, so, and then often parents are still around,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what's your process with that?
Okay, so I'll just quickly share that there's traditional forgiveness, where you probably find it maybe in a church or just out there. A traditional forgiveness is really difficult to do. It usually takes a long time and a lot of therapy. And I don't practice traditional forgiveness. The forgiveness I do is radical forgiveness. So what that means is that we are looking at it from two lenses, so to speak, two perspectives. We always look at it from the perspective of who our human experience. So we call that the world of humanity. And then once we've looked at it through that lens and we've, done the work around that, which I can talk about a little bit later, then we look at it through that spiritual big picture lens, which we call the world of divine truth. So when we can look at something from the spiritual big picture and zoom back out and look at it and say, I'm willing to be open to the idea that everything happens for a reason, and that all the experiences that I've had in my life are happening not to me, but for me to grow and evolve and heal. And relationships are for healing. So every relationship we have, there's something to teach us. There's something for us to learn, and we're supposed to have these healing, feeling experiences. So when it comes to parents, that's usually, can't even say that there's anybody I've worked with where we haven't started with their parents, one or the other, because it's always the parents. Because, as you know, or if I'll say for anyone that doesn't know, from 7 years and younger, we are in a programmable brainwave state, the theta state. So everything that we witness and we experience
It's
from 7
imprinting, yeah.
younger, yeah, it's all just imprinting. It's just a program. So if we've experienced trauma, we've been taught that it's not okay to have feelings. We've seen our parents fighting, and we end up really connecting to that, and that is programming us on how relationships are and how men and women act and whatever, all of those things. So we develop those core wounds, those limiting beliefs, through our experience, through our childhood. And it's not that there's anything wrong when we go through the forgiveness process. It's not about blaming the parents. The parents did the best they could at the time. However, usually the thing that has not happened for the individual who's doing the forgiving is that they've never had their story validated. They've never actually been able to tell their victim story. And we always start at that victim story. And people, a lot of people like to jump to
And
the end.
acknowledge, especially like with childhood. I mean, especially even growing up under like, you know, the whatever the Judeo-Christian guilt, but it's not like, you know, it's one of the Ten Commandments. You honor your mother and father. You
Mm-hmm.
don't talk bad about them. So you
Right.
really you go through a good amount of your life
Mm-hmm.
not even acknowledging the fact
Yeah.
that your needs for one were not met, but you might have been subject to, you know, even abuse like I
Yeah.
was.
Even neglect, abuse. Yeah, it could be anything. And the thing is it can be something really minor. You know, there's a lot of people that have just had fine lives. You know, there wasn't anything, but there's something in that thing, like they may have been neglected in some way, or someone said something that really stuck with them. You know, the parent was going through a hard time and they snapped at their child and you know, said something, you know, that hurt that child, and that child just takes that and it imprints in them, and then they go through their whole life thinking they're less than and there's something wrong with them, because that just keeps, you know, replaying over and over again. And a lot of times it's usually repressed or suppressed, so we don't even know it's there. It's in our subconscious or our unconscious mind, so we have no idea what it is. We just know that there's something that's holding us back and keeping us stuck, and we get triggered by the other person, right, or our parents.
Yeah.
So
So
we always
another,
validate. Yeah.
yeah, validate, acknowledge, and there's a huge, I mean, even just an awareness piece, right? Going back into your, like, I guess, inner child work, which is
It is. Yeah,
essentially what we do, because that's where it all begins.
definitely.
Um, how about coming from the lens of compassion? Because I find that being able to forgive, especially if it was a serious situation, or if the person is still in your life and they're not, that person is not willing to acknowledge that they did something wrong, or they simply don't think that they did anything wrong.
Yep.
They're just living their life. So I always ask to sort of go from a point of compassion, and that's not easy
Mm-mm.
for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's something that has to be cultivated. So
Yeah.
what is your process around?
Well, so I take them through stages, and I can get them to get to the compassion once we've gone through the stages. And always, like I said, the first stage is always for someone to have their story, that story of them feeling that, you know, a victim, being validated, for them to speak it out loud. Then we really get them to get in touch with what their feelings are and validate that they have every right to have those feelings. Then we move into collapsing the story, where we start to look at what are the facts of what happened and what are the interpretations that we made up about it, because we do that all the time, right? Like you, like the, what was the example you just gave me, like the parent that would, you know, was abusive to the child or something, and we would look at it, okay, so the parent did this, but the interpretation is that they don't love me, I'm not good enough, you know, no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. These are interpretations that form beliefs. So there's facts and there's interpretations that we make up about the story, and we usually end up making up a lot of sub stories because we somehow want to reconcile that. So when we can start to collapse the story, the energy starts to shift and collapse a little bit too. So it starts to break up a bit. So like you were saying, there's like feels like an energy block. When the story is collapsed, the energy starts to dismantle. Then we can move into the compassion piece. But what I always say to people is we have to have compassion for ourselves. We
Yes.
can't have compassion for someone else if we don't have it for ourselves. So if someone is really struggling with compassion for someone else, I always ask them, do you have compassion for yourself? Or how are you speak to yourself? What do you say? What standards do you hold for yourself? So it's a
Yes.
process, right? But you can't just jump and tell someone you have to be compassionate if they're not there. You got to kind of unpack it and see what's going on and why aren't they having compassion.
Yes, and I think too, like if that person is in your life still, I mean, if it's a parent, or if it's, you know, even a relative that you're holding resentment for, um, you know, you can't just, I mean, people do just decide to shut the door and not talk to their parents anymore. I
Yeah.
can't tell you like how many people I've encountered that just, you know, don't can't stand being in the same room as their parent
Yeah.
anymore. And it's, again, like you said, it's completely validated. It's just that, you know, absolutely acknowledging that. But even if you don't, um, I guess it comes down to the subject of how do you forgive somebody who's not sorry, like who's simply not sorry. You're not condoning their actions. And I really love the fact that you're moving yourself out of being the victim, even though you were victimized, um, into taking back your power. So you could choose to, I mean, there's one thing to be victimized, and there's one thing to continue being a victim, and to, you know, to sort of rise above the circumstances, because you were victimized, but you don't have to remain a victim.
Yeah. Or maybe they weren't necessarily victimized, but they felt that way, right? That's how we feel when we've our power has been taken, or we've given it away, so to speak. So your question was, sorry, can you
Was, yeah, like if they're still in their life and you have
right?
to,
They don't want to. Okay.
yeah.
So first of all, boundaries are very important. So taking that time, like you said, sometimes people have to, you know, cut off their relationship for a bit. There's nothing wrong with that. It's important that you do what you need to do to take care of yourself, but that's only going to last so long. And then people, you know, it's upsetting. They don't want to have to do that for too long. So what I do suggest to people to do is to remember, first of all, that you're not forgiving them for them. You're forgiving them for yourself. You're doing this for you, because when you allow someone else to be the person to cause your unhappiness, your you know, whatever, responsible for your life, you have no power over your life. So when you can choose, so I'm going to choose to take responsibility for my life and do this forgiveness work so that I can be at peace, you can do whatever you want, then it's a different situation where people feel like they're doing it for them. So what happens when we do the forgiveness work and the energy starts to shift? It's very interesting how the and we go right through the process. It's very interesting how oftentimes the behavior of the other person changes.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. Like the
Yes.
miracle actually happens, and I've seen
Miracle.
this
Yes,
in
they
my
do.
own life.
Yes, they does. So that's what happens. But we can't have an outcome. We have to be surrender, right? So we don't want to have an outcome of
Or
how
yeah, yes,
they're
have
going
an
to change.
expectation. Yes, have an
An
expectation.
expectation or an outcome, yes. So we do the work and we do it for ourselves. And we also remember that everyone's doing what they need to be doing. So if that other person doesn't change, we we feel different after we've done the forgiveness work. You feel empowered. You don't get triggered by that person because you're able to see it from a completely different perspective. And you're able to put healthy boundaries in place without feeling guilty, and you feel empowered, and you don't get triggered by what they're doing because you understand why it's happening. So I find when people do the forgiveness process, they'll end up going through some tests. You know, things will happen in their life that are kind of similar to what was we were doing the work on, and I find it so they can really get an opportunity to practice standing in their truth and being true to themselves, and not responding like a victim, but responding from a powerful I am place, right? So when they've done the process, that stuff starts to work itself out. Either the behavior goes away, the person goes away somehow, or the person just starts to change and try to make amends, or that person who's done the forgiveness work feels complete and they're okay to put a really good personal boundary in place where they're not in a position where they're being treated unfairly, or just in a way that they don't want to be treated. So it all sorts itself out. It's really
Yeah, and it's
interesting.
just it is really, and that's why I like the work that you do with the radical forgiveness. That it's not the same as love thy neighbor type of forgiveness, like that traditional, religious or whatever forgiveness, but it is trusting the process, trusting the bigger picture, and
Yeah.
also being open, if not in the very least curious to what the lessons
Mhm.
are for you.
And that's what it's all about. And I want to say that radical forgiveness actually is faith. Like any faith can use the work, and it applies to all. As long as you believe in some kind of higher power, you just use, and even when we do the some of the tools, they have a place where you put in what you believe in. It could be God, Buddha, the universe. It doesn't matter. It's whatever your higher power is. It's designed for anyone, unless there's someone that doesn't believe in a higher power, then it wouldn't work for them. But it does guide you to learn about yourself and to see where you have been withholding love from yourself. Because when we
Yes.
withhold love from someone else, we are automatically withholding love from ourselves. So all forgiveness leads to self-forgiveness and self-acceptance, all of it. It's always an inside job. We always think it's out there. Usually it always ends up coming back to us.
So what is that like for someone like who has been in, and I would have to say like, maybe even like a good 60-70% of people are living in like, you did this to me, therefore I am this, but essentially, or I'm not going to take responsibility for something that you did. But you're right, like it does really lead to self-forgiveness, but it's not in the sense that you did something wrong. Like, how do you
Yeah.
transform that conversation?
Well, so again, it's looking at it through the two different lenses. And when we look at it through the lens of the world of humanity, it's all about right and wrong. It's about duality, polarity. So when we look at it through the other lens, the spiritual, bigger picture lens, there is no right or wrong. It just is. So I usually will ask people if their ego is really hanging on to that and they don't want to let it go. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? What, it's your choice. When we feel that we have this need to be right, we're not going to be able to do the forgiveness process completely because we're still stuck in the world of humanity. So it's a process that I guide people to. So we always look at, why do we need to feel right? Is it because we need to have control over situation? Because we don't feel safe? Do we have, like, what is going on inside? So there's a lot of, like you say, inner child or shadow work going on. What are the parts of us have we, the forgiver, the person, that's doing the forgiving, what parts of you are you not looking at? Like, if you're judging someone because they're so selfish and they never think of anyone else, and you just can't believe it, they just treat you poorly. I would always, when I get to that point after validating, then we start to look at, so where have you been selfish? Where have you judged yourself for being selfish? Or maybe somewhere in your past, when you were a child, you got in big trouble and your parent told you, you're such a bad girl or boy because you're being selfish. So what that means is that's like a hidden aspect of that person that keeps coming up and being mirrored by other people in their lives, right? So when
Yes.
someone can start to accept that, okay, there is a part of me that's selfish and I love all parts of me, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to go out and be that way because we have free will choice, but accepting that we also could be selfish, right? Or have been
Yes.
selfish.
And then
And
that's
we
where
can,
the self-forgiveness comes, because
yeah,
it is just wholly accepting yourself for
yes.
all the,
And
as you said, it's the non-duality. It's like we are made up of these parts.
yeah, and
And
as soon
are
as
you
we,
willing?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And if you're willing and you can accept it within yourself, you stop judging it in others. It's
Yes.
amazing how
And
it just happens. So it's like a transformation. It just transmutes. It just disappears.
and then this is actually, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. David Hawkins' scale of
Yeah, it's part of my
vibration.
training. Yes.
Yes, mine too. So yeah, so
Yeah.
willingness and acceptance, and
Yeah.
across from acceptance is forgiveness. And
Mm-hmm.
then that in itself, like being able to, number one, be willing to accept who you are and everything that you've been through, all the mud and all the beauty of it. But it does, again, it puts you back into expansion mode. You're no
Right,
longer constricted.
yeah, because we can see that everything in our life, all the experiences, all the people, all the things that happen were happening for us. They all had purpose for some way, shape, or form. They had purpose. So when you can look at your life and see all those painful experiences as having some type of purpose to build character, to teach you about kindness, to strengthen your intuition, because as a child you always had to be on guard because you had alcoholic parents maybe or something, and you become very intuitive, and you ended up getting these gifts from the experiences. When we can do the perspective shift and focus on that, that's when the transformation happens. So it's
Yeah.
all purposeful. But this is what I'm saying for anyone that's watching. I always stress that that is about just being willing to be open to that idea, because really all we're doing is we're taking a victim story and we're trading it for a possibility that it was supposed to happen story. And there's
Yes.
gifts there. There's things to gain from it. So like it's like the hero's journey, right? We start out, with the challenge, and then we get to the climax, and then we come out on the other side golden. That's the human evolution, the soul's evolution, the experiences that we came to have were these experiences of duality. And then when we can look at it and not look at it like, oh, life's just, been so unfair to me, that's how a victim would look at it. But when we can do that work that I do with people, then they come out and they can have appreciation for everything they've done. And they can be okay that everything did happen for a reason. And they can actually feel appreciation for whoever the person they were forgiving. They actually
Yes. Or the
change the
situation.
reframe, the
Yeah.
situation, the person, everything. Because they look and they see, because I always bring people, when we reframe it at the end, we always look at it from the soul perspective. So the soul perspective is that, and this is just a willingness, that the idea that what if we all said we want to come down here and have these experiences, and we're here doing these things with and for each other to help us all have these experiences so we can, fulfill our mission, or work through the karma because we didn't get it right last time, if you happen to believe in past lives, whatever it is, flipping it on its head, that we actually came here to have these painful experiences so that we can learn and grow and gain wisdom and be able to help other people too.
Yes. And that's exactly, I mean, nobody wants to have adversity. Nobody wants to have gone
No,
through what they have gone through, right? But
no.
it is like you said, it is what it is. You cannot change it. And you persisting and wanting to, resist what already had happened
Mm-hmm.
is just choosing suffering,
Yeah. Or
really.
it's still happening. So, and I always have to remind people we cannot change other people, and we shouldn't even want them to change. The only thing we can change is ourself. So, that's
Yeah.
why it's always an inside job.
Yeah, and it is like it is about accepting your path. So, and I know this year has been very difficult for a lot of people, and I've had a couple of friends with that had gone through some really horrendous circumstances, and I can't even begin to tell them, like, you have to, but they are walking the path. What's happened to them has happened, and then now what? Eventually, the only thing left to do, if they're willing, is to just accept the path that was laid out for them.
Yeah. And what I
Right?
find with clients is once they've had the acceptance and they've done the forgiveness work, then they start to really find their purpose, because then
Yeah.
they really start to feel whole and complete. And
Yeah.
it's not easy to find your purpose when you're not feeling whole and complete.
No,
And when
it's
you can just accept, yeah, and be okay, and realize that, everyone's doing their part. Everyone's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. whether we think so or not. We're all right where we need to be.
Yeah. So,
That's
and
a
then
hard one,
finding
but
it is a hard one. It's
yeah.
not easy. Like
Yeah. No, I
it's
don't claim it to be, but it's easy when you let go of having a feeling you have to be right and look at it and you're willing to look at a different perspective. It gets a lot easier.
or when you're willing to just let go of the fact that you can't change anything
That
anymore.
too. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't change what
Yeah. We can't.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
And
sitting in
then
regret's not going to help.
eventually, yeah, and then eventually in the end comes the purpose, which you're even about your are you still doing your game? Your soul purpose adventure
Well, that's how
game?
I found my purpose too, was doing the forgiveness work. Then I started to, like, I got led to being a coach, but then I finally started to realize, yeah, so I have the soul adventure game, and that's to help people to focus on the inner part and what is it that they want, and learn how to have that positive, loving self-talk and acceptance for themselves. And we do it in the form of a game because it's inspirational. There's no pressure, there's no judgment. It's just for fun, but it becomes very insightful and inspiring. And people start to really learn about themselves and love themselves.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
love that. And then in
yeah,
the end, it's like with purpose comes your peace. And I
exactly.
think that's like, oh my gosh. And it's the
Yeah.
journey continues because life is going to put down another tree in our path, surely. But
Yeah.
every time yeah, you gain strength too.
Well, and also when people have worked with me, then they understand it, they can keep applying that same work to anything that shows up, any adversity that comes up happen in their life. They have this sense that no matter what happens, I know that I can handle it. I know that this is coming to me because there's something maybe else coming up to heal, or there's something, because it comes up in layers. It's not like it's a one and done thing. Forgiveness is something that you continually want to do, so you can stay at that vibrational around 350, 400. If you're practicing forgiveness on a regular basis for yourself, for others, whenever it comes up, you're going to keep your vibration up there around 350, 400 at least, and or higher at times, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
it
you can
really makes a huge,
continue.
yeah.
Yeah, and then you can continue being the creator of your life,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
Then we move into the manifestation, and that's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. I really enjoyed this
You're
conversation. I know
welcome.
it's a big topic.
Yeah, it's okay.
It can be very heavy for a lot of people, but I think that it needed to be, I think it's an important one. It's
It
definitely an important
is.
one.
And it's definitely not as hard as people might think it is, but you might want to look at radical forgiveness, because it definitely is a whole lot easier than the traditional. And yeah, we only have one life here. We want to make the best of it. So why do we want to hold on to the anger and resentment? Why we want to have peace and love and joy and happiness, and we want to spread that. That's what everyone wants. So Colin always wanted to create a world of forgiveness, and that is part of my mission too, is to help. And there's so much healing that's coming up for people. So
It
I'm
is.
glad you asked me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and it's a great foundation. Like I think that, as
Yeah.
coaches, we all have our niches and our specialties, but I think yeah, this one is definitely important and it's a great foundation to have. That's why I called you here
Thank you.
today. So
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you for everyone for joining. If you have
Yes,
any
thanks.
yeah, if you have any questions for myself or for Lori, feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Lori. I'll talk to
Well,
you soon.
thanks, Ivy. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone. Bye.
bye. Hi everyone, Ivy Lim